so that I don't forget. And we will post this on our YouTube channel for people who can't make it. So if you do speak up or if there's time, just bear in mind that you'll be recorded. Um, Before we begin, I'd just like to remind everyone that I'm chairing this meeting from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and acknowledge and respect them as the past, present, and future guardians and caretakers of these lands. And I encourage all of you to take a moment. I know everybody is calling in from different places. Take a moment to think about the traditional people and guardians of the land that you're on and what that means for all of us and the lives that we all live today. I have Michel here with me, who is I will let Michel tell you a bit more about his background, but he is a long-term human resources professional who has dealt with a number of the kinds of situations that we're all about to be facing. I also have Dan Whalen, who is our executive director, who is listening. And I just wanted to say that I'm very happy that Michelle was able to do this with us first thing on a Monday morning to help us with some of the decisions that people are going to be facing as a result of the upcoming WFA and comprehensive economic review situation. But just please bear in mind that Michelle is not a government employee. He's a consultant who has dealt with these kinds of issues in different contexts. So he will not be able to answer questions as I will not be able to, and Dan will not be able to, about exactly what global affairs or IRCC's plans are, what the government's plans are. There's a lot that we do not know. And some of this is to help us navigate some of that uncertainty. But I just want to say, we're not going to tell you things that if we're not sure about them. And because in a situation like that, that's going to make things worse. So some of the big part of this is to give you some tools for decision making on some of the questions and considerations that you need to take into account. So we are aware that there is a town hall that starts at 10:30, so that's why we're getting cracking right away. Michelle has his presentation that he will put up. And so without further ado, I will turn the floor over to him and let him talk. Michelle, I will listen and I'll keep track of the questions. People can use the Q&A button, but it's
Perfect.
only if it's really sort of a hot pursuit will I interrupt you. Otherwise, I think it would make more sense to leave questions to the end. So,
Exactly. Thank you. Perfect. So welcome everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for taking the time here today. As Pamela had mentioned, we may not have answers to a lot of things, but there's a lot of things that we can take into context that help us through these kinds of processes. And I've personally been on many ends of this, both as an employee, as an employer, and in very, very different contexts, small, medium, and very large organizations. So this is a bit of this instance of some personal experience as well, and questions that I've received. And if it's not only for my life partner and several friends going through this the situation, very aware and very engaged with speaking to them and understanding what some of the challenges are at the moment. Um, so with that, the session was designed specifically with PASO members in mind. As you are navigating intense periods of change with limited information or a different stream of information. So whether those are the ERI, the early retirement incentives, the WFA, the workforce adjustments, or the SERS, the comprehensive expenditure reviews, these will all lead to possible different decisions you need to take from restructuring, voluntary departures, team shifts, maybe even some status quo for certain individuals, which generate stress. And it's often how we react versus act to stress that and other factors that can significantly affect us. And I think it really starts with, this creates a moment of doubt. And that's when things start playing in our heads. And the intention here today is to actually create a safe space, a bit of a structured space in elements that can be viewed as chaos for certain people, where you can step back from the noise and hopefully people who are here today, thank you for taking that hour. And we'll be very careful to really invest this hour. Hopefully try to name what you're experiencing, look at your options more clearly, and potentially how to plan and step into it. So we'll be talking about well-being, career capital, what you carry with you no matter what. And to use a word that Pam and Dan have used on several occasions, your sense of agency, which is the things that you control. And there's many things you don't, but the things that you do control, how can you step into those in a thoughtful way? The part of this that remains under your control, it remains yours to deal with. And oftentimes, as we get into stress situations, we either can lose sight of this or not necessarily take fully advantage of it. You'll not be asked, anyone not today will be asked to share anything uncomfortable. If you have specific questions, please put them in the chat. And Pam and Dan will raise them accordingly, or if we don't have time to get through them, we'll take them and be able to do a Q&A and some other thoughtful communications with you as members. So you can participate quietly in the chat or out loud if there's specific questions. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A round as time permits. And I do know that there's I believe it's another meeting right after this. So if I think there was a 15-minute flex there, I'll remain around if there's specific questions to be answered. On vous demandera jamais de partager quelque chose dans lequel vous n'êtes pas à l'aise. Vous pouvez participer en silence dans le clavardage ou à haute voix dans la section questions et réponses à la fin. Toute façon de participer sont valides. Alors, merci beaucoup encore à tout le monde. In terms of, let me briefly talk through the purposes of the time we're going to have together. And the reason I come in with this slide is purpose is one of the key elements to link to any plan. It's what are you trying to do? So first, I want to acknowledge what you, me, other people are living, that uncertainty around a number of these different programs. It's not abstract, it's happening, and there's not necessarily clarity of information at this time. So it's affecting, real people, you, your families, your friends, and adjoining partners, etc. Second, we'll work to clarify possible paths and next steps. So this is very much a talk around a specific approach, simple one. I've also included a one-pager and a handbook at the end in both English and French for those people who would like to work through this process into a lot more detail or a little bit more detail. So it's not really, we don't want to be framing this as a simple stay or leave decision. Usually these things are much more complex and have multiple points right across that spectrum. In reality, there are multiple scenarios, timeframes. Third, I'll want to leave you with at least 2 or 3 practical tools, things to think through, things to work through, things to align yourself against, to help you make hopefully better, more informed decisions as you go through this process. Something with your well-being, something about your career capital, and something that strengthens your ability to choose rather than just react. So those are the 3 outcomes that I'm hoping that you'll be able to gain from this. And importantly, the session is not legal advice. It's not financial advice. It's not therapy. It's my role is to support your reflection and planning, planning anchored on a purpose, and to point you towards the right resources if you need more specialized support. If there's one intention today, it's this. If you walk away feeling a bit less alone, we often find ourselves isolated, and a bit more equipped to face the week and the months ahead, I think this investment will have been worthwhile. So over the next 75 minutes, these are the things we're going to be looking at. The pulse check is actually data and results from the survey. There's 68 people as of this morning that had provide us with information. So we're going to use these 75 minutes going through these elements. We'll start with a short welcome and a pulse check to get a sense of how everything is landing for you. Real data, data-driven decisions. Then we'll explore what this moment feels like, trying to put words on the emotions and those need to want to react and practical impact in your day-to-day life. From there, we're going to shift into the career capital. Everything you've built over the years is not disappear because of a reorganization. This is yours. You carry it. It's what you choose to do with it. Next, we'll look at some option scenarios through the lens of the plan framework, and which starts with purpose and gets us through next steps and actions. How to prepare, listen, link, ask, and act, and nurture and navigate towards your next steps. We'll then move into a Q&A anchored on key hotspots. You've identified 5 or 6 within the questions, the open-ended questions that you had. We can use this as baseline or answer other questions that are coming up. The common pain points and questions people are asking in similar situations. And again, you're not alone. There's different perspectives as well, and we'll be able to cover many of those. Finally, we'll close with a brief recap on some of the next steps and resources. So throughout, I welcome you to share your questions in the chat, and we'll work through them one at a time. I want to name the context directly so that we'll all be speaking from the same page. A lot of acronyms get flown by. I think we've worked through these, but many of you are living through the combination of these ERI, early retirement incentives, these WFAs, the workforce adjustments, and these CERS, comprehensive expenditure reviews, potential voluntary departures and changes to teams and mandates, and often all at once. And again, not knowing how it's going to run through. It's normal for this to trigger the mix of emotions at the moment, whether that's anxiety for some, frustration, anger, worry, maybe a bit of hope and curiosity about what's in the next steps. If you're feeling pulled in many directions, you likely are, because that's the way you're feeling. We can't take that away from you. Trying to support your team, family, and still perform at work, not easy. That's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're human, we're human, and it's humans going through this process. For this session, I'll invite you to give yourself a bit of a permission to pause, take the 75 minutes to pull back, which is what we teach leadership teams and people at all levels, professionals at all levels, to do as a first step, take stock. So for the next 75 minutes, you won't have to fix anything. This is about stepping back, taking stock. So let's do it together. Our focus is simple. Want to protect your health, protect your career capital, protect your sense of agency in how you respond. And at any point, if you need to step away, turn your camera off, take a moment, that's absolutely fine as well. So let's go with the survey data first. I just have to go through a little process here to do that. Please let me know if my screen is showing Pam Den with the 67 responses. Everybody seeing that? Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the first question that we had asked is, over the past 2 weeks, how much has the current workforce reduction process impacted your stress and emotional load? And this is the distribution right now. So there's a few individuals who feel not at all. And then it works through a fairly large percentage of people being impacted from a small, moderate, quite a lot, and extreme amount. So that's the distribution of 68 people. 68 is very relevant in terms of representing an ecosystem. Once we have more than 20 responses, doesn't mean it represents everyone or your point of view, but it does show that there's a distribution of people at different places, and that's important. You're not alone, but you're going to go through it differently than other people, and distinctly. And we have to take that into account, and that's really what this section's about, is how can you help yourself? The second one is, at this moment, how clear do you feel about your option and possible next steps in careers? So this is the element of control that comes out. And here we have Um, the majority or a majority of 43% saying it's not clear at all, or it's slightly clear or somewhat clear. Where it's mostly clear and very clear, there are a few people for them that this seems to have a clearer direction for some reason, and that's okay too. And for the others, probably asking a lot of questions. And we'll be looking at specifically how to ask and make questions and make sure that that is part of your plan. The third question is right now, how supported do you feel in terms of either peers, family, your union, your association, or other networks in navigating this transition? This is the element of often finding support. Interestingly, statistically, men do usually deal with this differently than women and vice versa. The key preoccupation is not isolating yourself and finding that ability to stay connected and get the supports. So here again is a feeling of not supported to slightly supported at 35. 34 is moderately supported and well supported and very well supported. Another 30% of individuals, so it's about a third, a third, a third in that one. In terms of the text, the open text, it summarized itself in or 6 questions. It was around questions around or comments around job security and loss. The primary concern is losing their job, including potential job loss for both spouses. So many families, 2 people employed. I have some friends actually in that situation right now with this department. Retirement and financial decisions at different spectrums of life. Lack of clear information. Several respondents expressed worry about the employer's absolute lack of clear, accurate, and timely information in order to make their decisions. The alignment posting instability. So you may have a career path and it's being interrupted. What are going to be the new career paths? These are valid questions. And the impact on the workplace and marginalized groups. There's worry about increased workload, already overworked staff, if there are cuts and transitions, negative impact on that and the ability to provide a high-level service and a disproportionate impact on cuts on marginalized groups. So these are 5 key themes that I know with Dan and Pam, we're going to be keeping front and center and ensuring that the information resonates with trying to provide support and help for these questions as much as we can. In terms of that anonymous pulse check provides us a good baseline. The goal here is not to label anyone. It was simply to get a snapshot of the room. And like I said, 68 people, but you are several thousand employees. So it doesn't necessarily represent how you're feeling or what you're feeling, but it does give us a bit of a sample of where we need to be seeking to provide supports. It definitely is an indicator that stress is being felt, how clear you feel of your options, and how supported you feel. So with these questions, all responses were anonymous. So I have no idea who responded, and no individual will ever be shown. So we're only looking at it from an overall picture and trying to use it to give us a bit of data-driven decision making on the supports. So is there Pam, any comments in the chat with regards to that data that we should be looking at?
I'm not seeing any. There were a couple questions that were not really related to your presentation. One on how to communicate with us and whether to use the info box, or if people are already in contact with an LRA, if they could do that. And I said, you're welcome. Please do both. Just just so that we can. It's fine to be in contact with someone that but if you copy our info box, we can manage the workload and make sure somebody gets back if somebody's on holidays or whatever. And someone else who asked about being on protected leave and how that would be handled. And I also refer that person back to our office since that's,
Yeah, that's a
that's
very
a Government
specific
of
case.
Canada specific thing. So no, I'm not seeing any comments. I had a question though. I mean, I actually was quite surprised. I thought, okay, a third of people feel well supported and another third feel somewhat supported. I mean, to me, that's better than I might have thought. What in your past experience, like, is this tracking with how other employers have handled similar things, or?
It's never the same, but it's through my experience, it comes back to the element of agency. Oftentimes, is this disrupting to me, and how am I handling it? Because I remember the first experience I had, I was in my 20s, and I had joined an organization about my third year in, and I was very attached to that. Not only the job, but the company itself. So for me, it was how I joined a company for at that time for life. I had that mindset, and so for me, that was very disruptive. And I remember one of my colleagues, similar age, similar time frame with the company, raised his hand and wanted to take a package, and I, not understanding it, went and sat down with him, had coffee. This is 30 years ago, and I still run across him, and in hindsight, his observations and analysis were as valid as mine. And coming from a very different perspective. And I think that's what it is. We don't know if people are getting help from inside or out. I think that would be the drill down into the questions for me, is where is that support coming from? Maybe it's coming from friends, maybe it's coming from family, maybe it's coming from bosses. And I remember a session I did for Paso, I think 3 years ago, on a whole other unrelated thing to a restructuring, but on career development, and seeing that senior professionals themselves, that having been managers, and middle level managers, trying to do something or more for their team. So it's that sense of we're in this together, we're going to help each other. And it may be coming from there. So at this stage, we don't know where it is, but I would say it's obviously coming from somewhere, and that would be an interesting drill down to maybe as a few other questions to see where, more specifically where those supports coming from, and how could we accelerate them.
Yeah, yeah, that's something we can look into to follow up for sure.
Yeah,
So thanks.
and I'd add one more, and maybe if you find a number, I would also add the EAP program, the Employee Assistance Program. If as a reminder, it comes a little bit later as one of the reminders, but if there are the coordinates to that, I would recommend someone putting it in the chat. But it's also another good referral point for certain services on a program that is often overlooked. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I it's one of the questions. I have a meeting later this afternoon with the deputies, and one of the questions I'm going to ask is what resources, they're putting extra resources in place with EAP, because I was at a an event a couple weeks ago, and there were people actually they were actually talking about setting up a dedicated government-wide like suicide crisis hotline, because apparently some of the EAP counselors, I haven't heard this specifically about our departments, but across government, are getting, people actually like contacting them in significant numbers, you know, threatening self-harm. And the counselors are saying, this is outside our capacity. We're going to need some more support. So yeah, I think that's
yeah,
definitely something. And having some data on this is will be good to help our arguments.
No, and that's a good highlight, because what you described there, self-harm, it's a 911. It's not assistance at this stage.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing. And been in a situation actually in the last week where I had to actually counsel someone to 911 versus not related to government or PAPSO in any way, but to another situation. And it was just that clarity around, if there's self-harm involved, it's more of an emergency of a 911 rather than support at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
most
Thanks.
definitely.
I'll let you get back to it. Sorry,
No,
I didn't mean
no,
to
no, no
interrupt you
problem.
there.
Thanks for those inputs. Um, One of the things that is important as well is putting words, and actually dealing with something is actually putting words to feelings before we can actually, the body needs to process it. And that's the connection between the mind and the body, is the feeling. And so we can't push it away. Sometimes we try to put a cover on it. And so, I want to talk briefly about how this context is showing up in our real lives. And again, this is one where women handle this usually statistically different than men, and vice versa. But uncertainty is not just in our heads. It's a full body problem. It's going to be in our gut. It's going to be in our heart. It's going to be, and also in our heads. And I know I'm one that as something starts going, it may stick in my head, and it shows up in our sleep, our concentration, our mood, our relationships. So it's not just about us. It affects our family, affects our friends, our community. And so just want to take stock of that. Name it is one of the things saying, yeah, I'm feeling anxiety. I'm feeling um, um, moody or not sure what to put it on it and work on that. It is helpful. So you might notice you're more easily irritated. Uh, you're more tired than usual or finding it harder to focus. You may be asking yourself questions like, what's going to happen to me? How do I plan anything when nothing is clear? Um, am I overreacting or underreacting? Um, and so again, where do you situate yourself? And taking stock of that for a moment is and can be very helpful. So whatever you are on that curve, whether it's shock, anger, you feel like bargaining, problem solving, negotiating, or even partial acceptance, non-acceptance, complete acceptance, it's normal place to be. So again, I want to come back to that sequence of emotion, brain, heart, gut, um, is our body and mind doing what it does. And we need to connect with it and call it out and name it. The purpose of this part of the session is not to fix feelings, not to be a psychologist, but also to just to make them visible and valid. It's a starting point. And whether I'm doing business planning, career coaching, or any kind of goal setting, it starts with that element of feeling and purpose and where do we want to go, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So I just move through the rest of the content. Keep noticing what's how's this resonating for you right now, and we saw that people are resonating very differently um, throughout the entire spectrum of possibilities. Um, Here in terms of I'd like to invite you on a short quiet reflection that can write or think if you have a piece of paper with you, or just but really two prompts. Over the past 2 or 3 weeks, how does this situation show up in your daily life? So if you, not only how you feel this morning, but in the last couple of weeks, think of your energy, concentration, family life, and team. I know my partner came in when they sent out the email and was already projecting a number of things without the information. So it was the first thing is recognizing that feeling of loss of control for a moment. And then rather than projecting is looking at what is it actually saying. And she's in that zone between 50 and 55 that with a number of years with a potential retirement package. So it's like, okay, they're going to be offering you something and you're part of that, those people who are going to receive this email. So there was anxiety in going to be receiving the email. There was anxiety at receiving the email, and there's anxiety after the email. That's normal. What do we do with it? And so uh, we talked and started working that out. And part of it you'll see with the plan today. It's I need more information before I go into that. The second prompt is what do you most need to protect yourself right now? So think of yourself. It might be your health, your income, your identity. For me, when I was back at that very large company, the name of it was Bell Northern Research in Nortel at the time, I had a very strong company identity. It affected me very much differently than my colleague. Um, it could be your relationships or something else. So name it, identify it. That's who you are. Those are the things that your head, your heart, and your gut are telling you that are important to you. Understand why it's important and why it's important to you differently or specifically. So there's no right or wrong answers in this. This is just you really trying to anchor in with what is driving stress. If you feel comfortable, you can share a word in the chat. If you don't, that's fine too. The purpose is to help you move beyond a vague cloud of stress. So, my partner coming in, having lived something, not be able to name it, to a more concrete understanding what matters for you at this moment and going forward. So again, that's really the beginning of your journey of dealing with it. Career capital is a big one. Many people join the governments because of stability. because of predictability on some elements, career paths that are planned out, many more than private companies that I've worked for, where these things were not necessarily part of the offering. So now let's talk about that career capital and what you take with you whatever happens. This is yours. It has nothing to do with your job, your government, your employer, or anything else. Your career capital is an accumulation of talent, aptitudes, competencies that you've earned and gained over time. It's you, it's yours. So your career is bigger than your current job itself, um, or your current organization, or your current department, or your current service, or your current role. Just want to put that in perspective. So over the years, you've built skills, relationships, a reputation on for you to show up under stress. I think most jobs we can say are stressful. They put us through a stress and we perform. How you collaborate and how you deliver. These are all things that we can't take away. They will not disappear because a named program changes things or a structure shifts or because a particular role is established or abolished. So, putting back together, we often call it a CV, but before you even start working on your CV, it's understanding who you are. And it's more than a list of tasks and things that you've done. So in uncertain times, knowing your career backpack is one of the things that you can do to really understand your assets. That's truly your major source of power in your calm. So, we often say quickly redo your CV. That's the paper process and the output. But the first part of it is really understanding who you are, because it will govern some of the choices you could make that you haven't taken stock of. So this next exercise, quick exercise, is about surfacing those assets so that when we talk about scenarios later, you're not sharing from a place of emptiness, but a place of strength. And essentially, the entire handbook, there's a 10-page version of it that goes into details around how to step through this process. I'm just going to go through it very summarily at the moment. And I've made a one-page version for individuals because some people like to start with the summary and go to the details. Some people prefer going to the details towards a summary, whatever works for you. Both tools are available in English and in French. So we'll come back with the links a little bit later on that. So that career compass exercise, I'll guide you through 3 quick prompts just to get you thinking on these on this subject and either jot your answers down or think through them. I'll also be handing out a complete handbook, as I mentioned, both in French and English around the exercises, so you don't have to be taking detailed notes on the process itself. So you can be thinking of yourself and where you're taking this. So it's really at the end of this conference, if you can hang on to one thing that you would change, one thing that'll make a difference to you, I think it's a noble objective in terms of having had an impact, because oftentimes we sometimes try to do too many things. So keeping it simple. So the first element is, start with usually that list, of brainstorm list, 5 or 7 concrete things that you do well. We tend to be very critical analysts in our jobs. We're always looking at improving things, and we sometimes forget actually to, again, connect that brain, that heart, that gut around the things that we do well. That would be valuable for almost any organization. These are the transportable skills that have nothing to do with that specific job and everything to do with it, but you can take with you in your backpack. For example, it might be negotiation, crisis response, briefing, languages, analysis, relationship building, many more. This is the one place I would say maybe be less modest. Think about what your colleagues and comments that you've had, things that you haven't recognized and taken the pat on the back for. The image I was given when I went through this exercise myself not too long ago was each of us have a sun inside, and that sun is that core purpose, what you want. That's what we're trying to identify. And then the rays of that sun, you might have 2 rays, 3 rays, 5 rays, 10 rays. These are the elements that radiate from that purpose, which is essentially around this question around what makes you who you are, beyond the CV, beyond the resume. What were you doing? Who benefited? What changed because of you? So that's that first exercise, really trying to get around center of who you are. The second question is identify 2 or 3 situations in the last year where you're at your best. So that's now putting it in perspective. And third, if your world were to change or evolve in the coming months, because for many it's going to be potentially a forced change, for others, maybe a chosen change and an opportunity. What are the 3 or 5 assets that you absolutely want to keep? Again, that core of the sun and its rays. Um, we often call them skills competencies. I like making a differentiation, and Pam knows you for this round. Aptitudes and appetences. These are things we like to do that energize us. So I know how to do many things, including finance. It's not necessarily the thing, for example, that generates energy for me. So I always look at the word aptitudes. These are things that tend to be natural talents versus competencies, which are things that I learned. Interesting to take stock of those. They make a huge difference in your energy level when you're engaging on something. And I realized that throughout my career. I was working at my skill level, competency level, not at my aptitudes level. And that came a lot later. And at that time, the energy level really, 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 really changes. A whole other subject that I unpack under a tool called Team Genie, um, and have a lot of pleasure working with people in really identifying what those aptitudes are and how to work them individually and as a team. And again, these are could be a key relationship, key result, something you can point to with pride. So again, it's going through your own history, making stock, finding that sun, finding its rays for you. With this list, that's your portable value. And once you do that exercise, you'll find that it's usually not 20, 30, 40 things. It's usually somewhere between 1 and 5. Um, and it's helps you concentrate where you want to put your energy, what really energizes you throughout your employment. It travels with you regardless of what happens in any single job, and we won't ask you to share it publicly, but it might be very useful for you to think of this in terms of this different scenarios, your CV and career conversations. So to me, if there's one exercise you would do, and again, trying to visualize it for you. What is that purpose? The sun, a few of your rays that are the things that you do exceptionally well that I call aptitudes. With that, we have a 4-step process, which is PLAN, which stands for an acronym for 4 different elements. So the first one is in building options scenarios is leveraging this framework. The goal here is not to decide today whether to stay, move, or leave. That would be completely unrealistic. But it's getting the grounding points, the anchoring points. So the goal is to actually reduce fear by exploring your assumptions, not making the decision. What are the assumptions you'll be losing? What are the things that are important to you behind each scenario? And once you break down the scenarios, for some it's stay or leave, but there's a lot of other scenarios in between. And for some people, it'll be 1 scenario, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter the amount, but it's to connect those scenarios with your purpose, your career capital, and go through it and do a plus delta on each of those scenarios. Starts doing the preparation. So the plan stands for the P, which is prepared with clarity and purpose. I found that the purpose piece is the hardest because we're often not asked to produce that element. It's not even a vulnerability, it's a strength around what really drives us beyond what we know what to do. The L is about listen and link, not isolating yourself. And also, too, is going to be a lot of information sometimes that we haven't heard. So it's connecting to it and to others. The A is for ask. We sometimes forget to ask for what we want. So if somebody is really in a situation where they like their job, or they have something specific that they would want, we often don't ask for it. Doesn't mean you'll get it, but that clarity of asking brings it closer to having an understanding of what's important. And you'll see that that may help focus the direction of the results you might be able to get. And the other one is act in small incremental steps. One of my business partners, Francois, it's the technique of the small steps, la technique des petits pas. we tend to want to lunge forward and solve things, and oftentimes we forget that it's more of a marathon, and each marathon is a step closer to the finish by taking these little steps and working through it. And so the technique of the little steps is usually very, very helpful in doing the iterations. Um, and then last one is nurture and navigate your next steps. Because once you have a plan, it gives you a bit of a direction. Two ways to imagine this. And I'm going to jump to the other one, but the first way to imagine it is think of it like a GPS. What does it give you? Gives you a destination. That's where do you want to go? But then it usually gives you multiple routes. And some of them are open, some are closed, some of them are gravel roads, some of them are paved. And so that's really what you're doing here is you're setting your GPS for yourself with the multiple roads of the scenarios. So just want to go with that image. And one other way that you can look at this is with this model, it's, I realize I'm not in presentation mode here. So for this model here, it shows the strategic leadership. And I talk about leadership in terms of self-governance. And we sometimes forget that leadership is often used in the Oxford Dictionary to mean a position of power. But personal leadership is about self-empowerment, auto-governing ourselves. And so I do believe that this is an exercise in strategic leadership for yourself. And let's call it what it is. It emerges when two things come together. And through different teachings and programs that I've worked, it's agility, which is that ability to move quickly, and coherence. That's the ability to tie things together. And larger organizations tend to have a lot of coherence and go slower, and smaller organizations are often told that they have more agility and move faster, but it's an and because one can create dispersion, the other one can create rigidity, and really you're trying to find that zone today around both, and that's what that iterative planning does. It permits you to be more agile and yet have a bit of a structure. So it's the end. So the key message here is what matters most is not the quadrant you're in today. So don't be judgmental. It's your starting point, but the clarity that moves you towards that strategic zone of the end through the iterations. Leadership is a direction. It's a personal practice of being the best version of you. It's not a label. It's not a position. So I look at leadership as a practice of being a better self. And I think each and every one of us can benefit for that as we go through. So personal leadership starts with clarity of purpose. Who are you? Where you want to go? And that second one, what matters most. This is annoying, isn't it? That little thing here. I don't know where to put it. It's not going to be in our way. And what matters most is the quadrant, but how you move through it over time. And as we start getting towards a bit of a wrap up here, let's look at three broad scenarios that many people are considering or living through the feedbacks and whatnot. Scenario A, remain in your current or evolving role. The title might stay the same. I found that in especially large organizations, title is the same. A lot of things change within it. And this is why I find that certain people go into a job and a title and succeed, and maybe in another one, it's the same job and title and don't succeed. Could be what's being requested of the role, could be the expectations, could be the goals, could be the team, it could be the culture. There's many, many different variables there. So it's not homogeneous. So the fact that you're, to me, it's go beyond the title of the role and the tasks. Look at the team, look at the workload, look at the context changes. What is different fundamentally from this one to that one to that one? It may create opportunity. It may create a different level of understanding. Scenario B, moving to a new internal opportunity. That could be redeployment, a lateral move, or a development role in another area. Again, uncertainty of changes involved. What does it mean for you? Would you consider in, not in? These are things that you're starting to put parameters for yourself that will help shape decisions. Again, they're your assumptions that are important to you. The third one scenario is transition to an external opportunity or voluntary departure path. And again, these are three. There's many more scenarios, but helping you work through those consciously. Um, think of what might happen now, later, not at all. Um, it's helpful to explore these around what are your assumptions, what are the questions you would have. We don't have all the answers, but if you chew through this and start putting down your plans, it creates a structure for our brain, our heart, and our gut to connect, um, and puts you in a posture where, as decisions will need to be taken, you have a bit of a structure to go back to. None of the scenarios are good or bad in themselves. Again, we're not labeling in these goods or bads. We're looking at the assumptions behind each for you specifically, just like my colleague, for him, that leaf scenario, he had worked it out as the best option for him over time. And for me, it was different. Neither was right or wrong, but we were both able to talk to each other at that time and years later about it. Very different conversations, by the way, when we actually did a bit of a postmortem on it several years later. And as we talk through them, I invite you to notice which scenarios tend to think about most. Those might be your tendency, your approach, and what stories you're already telling yourself about it. Have you labeled some of them good or bad instead of looking at them and saying, what if? What if this happens? What if this happens? What are the elements that it can produce? So what we're doing is expanding our horizon. Um, for each scenario, there's a couple prompts that we can look at here. And again, you can apply them silently or put some notes into the chat around how you are acting and reacting on these. And scenario A, remaining and in an evolving role. The first question you'd be asking is, what feels heavy in that picture? Oftentimes it's, am I ready for it? Retraining. I might feel like an imposter. I might not be ready for it. Why not? What still feels possible or even positive in all of this? What boundaries or supports would you need to protect your health and your performance? So again, back to what do you need? What are the rules of engagement for you if that were to be possible? Scenario B, new internal opportunities. If you picture yourself now in 6 months into a new role, which of your current skills and relationships would you be leaning on most? So if you come back to that sun and those rays, which ones do you count on most frequently? Which ones are easier to engage with? Which ones might be more irritant or scary to engage with? What would you need to learn and unlearn? There's a bit of a concept that when the cup is full, we can't put any more in it, which means to learn again means that we have to let something go. Well, would you be prepared to let go to learn something new in this time of transition? Because if a lot of people are going through transition, there has to be some level of understanding that there's going to be adjustments. And so for what might you want to unlearn and relearn something new as part of that list? Could be an interesting question to ask. Scenario 3, C, external opportunities or voluntary departures. If you imagine telling a friend about that move 1 year from now, you're at coffee, we're basically at the end of the year, 2026. What story would you want to be able to tell on how you handled this period now? You could come back and talk to your 1 year younger self. What would you tell yourself now that you could have, should have, would have done by taking the time to actually go through it? And again, the purpose here is not to make choices now, but to see your assumptions more clearly. In a fuzzy world, understanding what you're going to anchor yourself to is extremely helpful in making better decisions down the road. And that's what we're trying to do today is not help you make a decision, but put you in a mindset where your decisions will have hopefully better impact for you. And to connect each scenario back to your strengths and your values. Again, that's important for you. So we'll bring it down here to something very concrete and manageable as a 1, 2, 3. If I were to ask you one thing, if you can identify one concrete step that you can take in the next 7 to 10 days, from what you're heard today, um, that would strengthen your position under any scenario, what would that be? So if you're, that's the first challenge. And the examples could be updating a part of your CV, and even before you get the CV, clearly understanding your purpose, what makes you tick, what creates energy for you, what drains energy for you, understanding that. Writing it down is very different than holding it in the head. Some of those key achievements that we lost sight of. I remember going through and peeling through my CVs, and rather than going through tasks, was accomplishments, and it was a difficult exercise because I hadn't documented it that way. So thinking of it from a different lens. Um, we often go through the lens of what have I done instead of what impact have I had, what value it had to others, how would they would describe it versus I would describe it. And I've done that with several clients, having had a great experience. Was what, in your words, what did you just live? Trying to capture that something beyond the technique around what they got out of it. And that's that element, that moment of clarity, that moment of helpfulness that basically enables you to make better decisions. Booking conversations with different people, colleagues, your union representative, a manager, HR, EAP, friend, spouse, having a date with your spouse, to a trusted colleague. Again, isolation is the killer here as well. And not trying to promote a rumor mill, but thoughtful conversation around your assumptions and your choices. And basically, if we look at that one small step, if you were to add one small basic habit that supports your health and energy in the next weeks, to me, that would be a very valuable outcome as well. Something that is fully under your control. You control that. That could be a real meal away from a screen. It could be a short daily walk. It could be going to bed 20, 30 minutes earlier, making space for a conversation with a loved one. There are many little things. So if you were to take care of yourself with that little new behavior, that can give you that extra little support, becomes important at this stage here. Pick the wins, one grain of sand at a time. I often say, with sand we build bricks, with bricks we can build walls, and with walls we can build society. Again, sometimes that little grain of sand is unimportant at the moment, very helpful as you start stacking them together. These actions are not going to change the whole situations, but they'll support you while you navigate it. And this is right now troubled waters for many people, and that's really what matters. And again, if you have some suggestions in the chat. Some hotspots in Q&A, so we'll get into more of the questions. I'm going to defer on this one here, but we'll get into opening up the time to people for questions. There's many themes: balancing loyalty to the team, navigating guilt, worries about family impact, finances, relocation, not knowing how to talk about a period. In future job interviews, you're going to need to sell yourself again. Not easy. Fear of being labeled not committed because you're making choices that colleagues or others might find less popular if you're looking at external options. Again, there's a whole slew of things here that we need to put in perspective, and trying to remove it from the equation as not being helpful. So let's kind of dive into these questions, and I'll summarize it with 2 more slides here, but just to wrap up, one idea, one phrase, one tool from today. If you carry away, you'll have a plan, a small plan. Hopefully the guidebooks will help to reinforce that. And again, this period is not defining your value. You define that. And you'll have choices, some many, some less. But that career story is yours, and you're still the co-author if you invest the time in it to actually curate it. So thank you for your trust and patience today. And I'll leave these QR codes up, and perhaps Pam and Dan will be sending them out to everyone. The top left-hand one says Handbook EN. That's the English version of the full handbook. To the right is the one-page summary. You have the French guide, Le Guide. That's the bottom left hand, and on the right you have the sommaire of that guide, the one-pager, as resources offered to you today. And I'd love to have your feedback on these. For people who want to communicate to me in French and people who want to communicate to me in English, my contacts informations are there. And I'd like to open up the floor to discussion and questions.
Thanks, Michelle. That was great. I think, you know, we should probably be doing these kinds of things regularly, even when we're not in a situation like this, right? Like just the way you talk about, you know, having a look back through your career and thinking about your accomplishments. I mean, I think most of us don't really do that. We're not, I mean, people do, have an annual evaluation and so on, but I mean, in my experience anyway, it's usually pretty pro forma. It's quite rare that you get actual real feedback, real discussion with your manager. And we tend not to think about what we actually did. I mean, I know when we were looking at making the presidency of a permanent part of our structure, the full-time presidency, I was keeping track of like how I was spending my days during the pilot, how I was spending my time.
Yeah,
And I had a to-do list, and then I also started keeping a did-do list. I mean, more tactical, on a daily basis. And at the end, I was like, okay, wait a minute, if I hadn't done that, I don't think we would have had an accurate picture
yeah,
because so often your to-do list, you get sidetracked by things and you get to the end of your list and you think, oh, I wasted a day. I didn't get through my list. And if you don't actually sit down and say, okay, but I dealt with this, and this important thing that I had not seen coming, you're not giving yourself credit. I think maybe that art of giving ourselves credit is something that a lot of people could use.
it's a tough exercise, actually. It's a lot of the stuff that's written on that paper that's been discussed today. It's harder to do thoughtfully, and in some cases, it's a lot of these social norms of not being able to pat ourselves on the back or so taking stock is an exercise. And it's something that I think is valuable and can be done. And like I said, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. Um, but going through your resume with a different lens can be very helpful. And there's one lens that's more required by the market or the context that you're in. But for me, there was one point I redid each header of my CV was hired by, in this case, by the CEO or the CXO to do this. And I wanted to get that sentence out throughout because I wanted to be action-based, verb-based, impact-based. That was a tough exercise. And it wasn't just taking a translator and or ChatGPT and getting it done. It was thoughtfully why did I go there? Why did I accept that job? And I remember, and I was a leadership trainee early in my years, and the hardest thing to do was to convince managers that I would leave because they considered like, once you take this job, you're here for life, Michelle. It was like, what do you mean leave in 6 months or 12 months? So what I ended up by doing, because I didn't want to be, I wanted a leadership training program that would give me different things. And I was one of the first, so the program hadn't been established. So for managers, it was awkward. And having thought through it, I came to the solution of replacing executives, women in MLA, maternity leave absences became the strategy. But that was developed, through the fact that the culture wasn't accepting the move. But these are very, very hard positions to fill because the law requires that role remain open. And so there's an automatic exit. So it became a thoughtful pathway to get that. But it wasn't immediate. It was through talking with different people, understanding the culture and how the flow, it's like a flow of a river. You're not going to change the flow of the river, but it might, it's nice to have a boat and a paddle. and you're going to get across to the other shore, but how? Um, and I think that's really what this career planning is about is there's a lot of assumptions we've done, each of us. How do we think about it differently, look at it through a different lens? And that's where I
Hmm.
think just doing that exercise is highly likely to create a different perspective on how you might want to approach and some of the options viewed differently as well.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, a couple people have said they missed the QR code. I'm wondering, could you go back and put that up
I
on the
sure can
screen
do that.
just
Yeah.
while we're chatting? And Dan, did you have any questions or comments you wanted to make for Michelle? Oh, and I'm just looking. There's a couple questions that have come in, so I will
Well,
come
listen,
back.
let's go to those questions first. But I guess, my only simple reflection is that, in times of uncertainty, it's very difficult because we all are really pushing for some form of certainty, some grain of sand, as Michelle put it. And, if we can get them, we hold on to them. But I also have always kind of cautioned myself about building too much out of that grain of sand. You kind of need to have it. It's good to have the anchor that you can rely upon. But in times of uncertainty, finding that information that you can rely upon is sometimes difficult. And I reflect back on Pam's original comment about us at PAFSO not wanting to provide information that's not reliable. So we work really hard to make sure that when we are going out to our members, that we provide information that is to the full extent possible reliable, and that we can start to build our planning around. So, but yeah, let's go to the questions that have come in from those on the call.
Yeah, so I see. So there was one person thanking us for the thanking Michelle for the information. So I said, "Great, I'm glad you found it useful." And then there's another question. I have a hard time selling myself during interviews. I also have no idea what skills or knowledge I've gained as a trade FS translates into the outside world or what to look for. What are possible resources I could use to help with this? What do I need to look for? Um,
Uh, Definitely the guidebook literally walks you through many of those elements. And I think it's the first element is having that clarity of that sun plus the rays, because once you understand who you are, the next step then is around being able to speak about it confidently. So that'll be a different kind of prep. But the first thing comes down to really clearly understanding that purpose and what you do well, where you're learning and accommodating, doing that research then against the position itself. And then the selling yourself is there's actually the competency of speaking to it. And I'll give one example. It wasn't an interview, but the first time I had to speak in front of a very large crowd, I used to be very intimidated by that. And here I am at the time, head of human resources, and we had done an acquisition and had to be in front of several hundreds of people. And to prepare for it, don't know why, but I ended up by watching our two political leaders. At the time, it was Pierre Trudeau and uh, Mulroney. But for some reason, because I was saying, well, these people are good orators, so I want to learn from some people that I see as the best. And for some reason, I actually looked at and listened to it with no sound. And what I realized is that their faces were turning red and their hands were shaking. But yet these are people we say are great orators. So sometimes the conflict is within us around how we perceive us not being good, and we basically slow ourselves down. So I would say there's an element of self-perception. There's the actual skill. And so where are we on that? That's, I think, where would need to assess your ability to present yourself in interviews. And a tool that's now available more and more is a ChatGPT or equivalent, being able to walk you through a dry runs and processes and score you and give you insights on specific elements that you're trying to build up. So now you can actually practice with these tools. Historically, without these tools, I would say, practice in front of a mirror and practice in front of, after that, it's, friends and family. Um, and speaking it out loud, if nothing else, if you're by yourself. It's funny to say, but it's back to getting these things written and then out into the open space. So if you were to be able to practice interviews out loud is another technique that we sometimes forget. That's simple to use and doesn't take a lot of additional, tools to do. So these are different techniques, but it really comes down to clarity of purpose. And then the rest is really a good diagnostic around, is it my comfort level, like with public speaking? Because others who do it well, their face turns red and their hands shake. And yet it's my self-consciousness, or is it that there's things I need to improve through practice? And there's nothing like little steps and practice. Lastly is there's a lot of bias towards, and I teach it in reverse, to people who are extroverts. Natural extroverts will usually present themselves better for equivalent skills. That's a known. And you can bring that out and saying, I'm a thoughtful person, I'm a little bit shy. And again, if that's part of who you are, it's actually can be a strength, not a weakness. And I think that comes down to the aptitude. Somebody who's thoughtful, who's not always going to try to put words in the air, might be appreciated by the team at a time if you're in an analytical role or at a moment where thoughtful response is necessary. So you can sometimes view your strengths as weaknesses and self-sabotage yourself. Or the reverse, look at it as what does your approach to it bring? And the fact is we don't master everything. We're great at a few things. And I think that's where, this is where I really talk about aptitudes with the Team Genie, is what makes you special and different aside from everyone else for that job, and speak to those elements, because that's what you're trying to do, is sell yourself.
Thanks. We had a couple questions. One person asking if we can share the QR code by email. We will
Yes.
discuss with you how exactly to distribute the QR code after. I'm thinking we can put it in the description of the YouTube video too. So if you're okay with that, so people can find it there, and we can make sure you got it. If somebody did not try to download the books and couldn't get it, send us an email at info@pafso.com and we can figure out how to get it to you. Aussi,
Yep.
il y avait un commentaire que il serait bien d'avoir une session bilan. I thought that we did, mais Michel, tu es capable de répondre aux questions en français si quelqu'un veut
Oui,
poser ou en poser une.
s'il y a des questions en français, aucun problème. Puis j'ai aussi, j'ai mentionné, les guides sont bilingues, alors les outils le sont aussi. Donc, j'invite n'importe qui à poser des questions en français.
Yeah, but I feel like this probably should not be the last session that we have of this, and maybe if we have you back in a couple months when we get to the next phase, maybe we'll do a presentation mostly en français for that, and we need
Sure,
to.
no problem. And I still have to figure out how maybe sometimes just do it simultaneously French and English with two decks, but I haven't figured that one out yet, technically.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we did get you to put this together on fairly short notice, so we appreciate all of the resources that you've accumulated for us. Is there anything, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed, being a little bit distant now from not going into the office, into the departments, one of the departments every day, is how people really do not see their skills as linking up with the market. And from my perspective, in a nonprofit, more in the nonprofit world than the government world at the moment, I see tons of crossover, and I see lots of ways where, FS officers' skills would be very, very in demand in a lot of these roles. How do you think what can people do? I mean, I think one of the things to do is honestly look at job postings, look at applications and see, what they're looking for, and think about how you can translate your skills into that. And also, if you see something missing from you don't have experience in a certain thing, take advantage of the current employer to see if you can get that. I mean, in government, we have tons of access to training and, even to conferences and all kinds of, networking opportunities. Think about how you could, if there's a certain type of software or something, how you could beef up your skills if you see that something that's being asked for. Like in a lot of cases, it's not a big gap. It's just a matter of making sure that you get that. Like I'm thinking of AI, for example. I mean, the government is quite far behind in implementing artificial intelligence. They keep talking about it, but they're not, to me, it's not clear what they mean when they say they want to use things. Like, can you suggest anything in particular that people could be doing to make themselves more marketable at the tail end of 2025?
And again, I'll rephrase the challenge because it could be perceived as people trying to jam themselves into boxes. And so the first thing, because you have to understand the industry itself, when a job gets posted, and I'm not talking necessarily just government, but there's private sector as well, 80% of jobs usually get filled before they're posted. And I think that happens even in government as well. There's, roles and responsibilities and stuff that are often created around individuals. And, let's not put our head in the sand that it doesn't happen, but it's so if 80%, so the 20% being posted, if you consider that a box, then you're trying to make that equation and then you're going through an application process. So again, if you step back and understand who you are, what you do, and the value you bring, you should be approaching companies and decision makers with that value proposition. And it could happen and will happen that they'll shape a role for it and whatnot. And so there's that element that many jobs are created around individuals who are solving a problem. Secondly, is not thinking necessarily in terms of just, permanent jobs. Myself, I've been in industry twice, which means I've been as a consultant twice. The last time I left industry was in 2018, but I did 10 years at 4 different companies, 2 of them for 4 years. Both those jobs were created around a business problem. The first one was started out with they were looking for 2 executives, and in the interview, I basically helped them do a diagnostic, saying not only that sounds very expensive, but what are you trying to do? And we got clarity of purpose. They didn't know what it was, so it was a 30-day contract. That 30-day was extended for another 90-day, and then that became a 4-year job. So again, these things are not necessarily linear. And oftentimes we associate stability with a permanent job, and yet in at least I've helped coach many people to say, well, oftentimes that contract gets you in the door and will get you the permanent job, where someone trying to knock in on that door from outside is not going to get in, or it's going to take a lot more effort to get in. So now you're looking at value, you're looking at effort, you're looking at strategy, you're looking at communication and connection. Instead of saying, well, here's a list, and I think we should do an assessment around these kinds of jobs require what. ChatGPT is a great tool for that. I did it just actually 10 days ago for myself to say, where do I need to develop my own development plan? Actually, it was my own performance evaluation on myself to say, what do I want to, and how do I project myself as a leader, and how do I project myself as a coach? And it gave me elements that to build on. So I think you have to do that delta against the job, but then when you start looking at who you are and what you want and how you communicate, I really find that networking thing will come back time and time and time and time and again as being one of the biggest levers in opening doors that on jobs that were not posted. And so there's a whole underground market there that is underused. And in there, the language is really around solving a specific problem. And then, like many people, because I've helped D&D people who've retired to go to industry, and I've helped a lot of people who lost their job in industry, like from Reuters and stuff like that, to how to approach the government and get jobs. So I've seen people navigate both ways, and it comes back down to what's in this guide. Understand your purpose, understand what makes you special, and what energizes you, and then use that as a lever within the processes, and understand the mechanics of job postings. Who's making the decision? How they can make the decision? And I was speaking just last week to a friend who posted a job for an HR generalist, and he received 835 applicants. Like, my God, it's so we are living at a time right now where the traditional job process may be more challenging. So, what are the other options to create career continuity and maybe other things like that, where contracts, temporary assignments, and other things may be useful. If I go back to myself as well in a team, I was recently joined a board of directors for a fairly large Canadian program linked to a university. And it was funny because they asked me, Michelle, what do you want to produce on the board? And the question I asked was, what does this board not like to do? I'll do that. That was my answer. So it was basically, who doesn't want somebody who's very useful wanting to do the things that nobody wants to do? We're back to aptitudes, because for me, there's an element of curiosity there. It doesn't mean I'm going to be stuck with it forever, but why do people not like it? What do they not want to be doing? Can I automate it? Can I fix it? Can I do something with it? We're back to that value creation element. So by answering that, it actually came back where I think initially I was in the top 20 of candidates, and I came out in the top 3. And that was one of the things they referenced specifically, was that value creation, that, Michelle, you're ready to step up on things. Doesn't mean I'm prepared to do everything and anything. But it came back down to, how do we create value, and how do we do that networking, and how do we try to get that acceptance and make ourselves different based on our uniqueness. And for me, doing a piece of work for 3 months, 6 months, or a year that is unpleasant for others, there's a certain satisfaction there. For others, it might be something that is quite undesirable. So again, that's very unique.
Michelle, thank you so much. I've got my eye on the clock. It's according to my watch, it's 9:18.
Yeah.
So we've kept you for longer than an hour. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to say thank you, and then I'm going to stop the recording just for a minute, and just in case